nest and they consume their foliage, whereas cicadas are more related to aphids, and they have sucking mouth parts. So they have straw-like mouth parts that suck plant sap from the leaves or the roots of the plants. So very different animals. The other thing is locusts tend to be relatively solitary unless there's some type of weather event or limited food resource, and then they go into this swarm mode, and we get swarms of locusts that cause devastation to many, many crops and plants. Where cicadas, they emerge by the millions every time they come out of the ground. It's part of their biology. It's just what they do. So they aren't really swarming, it's just their biology. We also get the question sometimes, don't we see cicadas every year? What's the big deal? Well, we do see cicadas every year. There are basically two types of cicadas, or two groups of cicadas, the periodical cicadas and then the annual cicadas. So every year in our area, we do see annual cicadas. Annual cicadas have life cycles that can be 2 to 8 years to complete, but every year, some cicadas emerge out of the ground. So some of these annual cicadas emerge. Okay. They also emerge later in the summer. So midsummer to late summer is when they come out, and they have a greenish coloration. Whereas the periodical cicadas have either 13 or 17-year life cycles. When they emerge, they only emerge on those 13 or 17 years, and they come out in a huge number, by the millions, by the billions even. They occur in the spring. So they occur usually around mid-May through June is when your periodical cicadas are active. They have red eyes like you see on this guy here, and an orange wing venation. So two different animals, even though two different types of insects, even though they're both cicadas. And tonight we're going to mainly focus on our 13 and 17 years periodical cicadas. And in particular, we're going to see brood 10 this year, which we will focus on also. When we talk about the 17-year cicadas, we actually have 3 species of cicadas that are occurring. So at any given time, if you hear, when the cicadas come, you hear the chorusing and the singing up in the trees, there can be 3 species up in that tree at the same time. So there's Magicicada is the genus of the periodical cicadas, and there's a species Septendecen, Magicicada cassini, and Magicicada septendecula. They co-occur, they differ in their size, as you can see from the image, and they differ in their color pattern also. So here, this is the bigger cicada is the Septendecen. You can see the abdomen on the underside is more orange in color. The cassini is smaller and black in color, and then the septendecula is small but has both orange and black coloration. They also have unique calls. Oops, sorry. Just trying to, okay. And I'll do the calls. Oops, hold on. So they all have a unique call, and this is the call of the Septendecen, the larger of the cicadas. Okay. And then we have the cassini. You can hear very different song. And they each have their own song because it helps them to find their own species. So it's the male that makes the song, and then it's the female that will recognize, it's attracting the females. The females recognize the song and will make sure that they end up with the right species. And this is the third species, septendecula. Kind of a little chirping sound. Then when we have the 13-year cicadas, there are 4 species of 13-year cicadas. And again, they vary in size and color pattern. Their songs are different and their habitat preferences are different. So in several locations in the eastern United States, there are enormous numbers of cicadas that emerge simultaneously. And these different groups that emerge either on 17 or 13-year cycles are called broods. And the broods are designated by Roman numerals, like you see here. And a brood is a group of cicadas that emerge simultaneously in the same geographic location at the same time. And usually a brood will emerge at the same location or general area that their parents 17 years ago emerged from. And what this map shows is they just color code the different broods. So every brood has its own color, and you can see how some of them emerge in quite broad areas, and they can be patchy from where they emerge from. What the table here shows are the numbers of the 17-year brood cicadas and then the 13-year brood cicadas. And this year we're having brood 10 right here, 2021, which is going to occur in 15 states. So how many broods are there? There are 15 broods total. 12 of those broods are 17-year cycle periodical cicadas, and 3 are 13-year periodical cicadas. And we know that 2 broods have already gone extinct, a brood up in Connecticut and a brood down in Florida. And again, this map just shows kind of the different patterns of where the different broods occur. But remember, they're occurring at different times in different locations. When we look back at the evolution of cicadas, we see this, if you look at this table or this graph, at the bottom is millions of years ago. So if we go back about 3.9 million years ago, that's where our Magicicada genera divided into 2 species. So we had the decular and the decim that divided. Okay, and then we had about 2.5 million years ago, the decula split to decula and cassini. So we had 2 groups emerge there or break out there. And then only about 500,000 years ago did we have kind of this large radiation of the different cicada species and the different broods developed of the different cicada species. And we're not really sure why that happened. We're not sure what the mechanism for that is. We just know that it did happen. Now, maybe some of you remember, and I hope most of you have had the experience of periodical cicadas before, but if not, you'll be quite fortunate to experience them this year. Last year and 4 years ago in 2017, we did see some periodical cicadas showing up, and they weren't showing up with another brood. What they were they were early brood 10 cicadas, and we refer to these early cicadas as stragglers. Okay, so stragglers are cicadas that emerge off schedule from the rest of their brood. And these stragglers usually appear 4 years early. So for 17-year cicadas, the brood 10, they came out early in 2017. Sometimes they'll do it 1 year early. So some also came out last year in 2020. But we had no other broods emerging in this area at that time, so we know they were stragglers to brood 10. Then there's something called accelerations, and accelerations are stragglers that emerge in numbers high enough to actually sustain the brood. Okay. And the appearance in 2017 of these stragglers could potentially result in an acceleration of brood 10. And we think actually these accelerations are part of why we have so many broods right now. So they tend to accelerate in 4-year time spans. And so if you think about it, if we had brood 14 and it accelerated by 4 years, it could establish a brood 10. If brood 10 accelerated by 4 years, it could establish a brood 6 and so forth, just by jumping these years. So that's one explanation of a possible reason why we have so many broods. Now, we're also asked a lot and wonder a lot about the synchrony. Why do we have this massive synchronous emergence of the cicadas? Why do they have such long life cycles of 17 or 13 years? And why do they tend to be on prime numbered years? And these are all questions that we don't really know the answer to for sure, but there are different theories as to what those reasons might be. And some of them we're pretty confident in are the reasons. Now, if you think about the massive synchronous emergence, well, first of all, that makes it easier to find mates, right? If everybody's coming out about the same time all together, everybody's there, you're going to be able to find a mate. The other thing that these periodical cicadas do is they have a type of defense called predator satiation. And basically what that means is safety in numbers. So enough cicadas emerge at the same time so that every predator, everybody who wants to eat cicadas, and a lot of animals want to eat cicadas, can eat their belly full, and there will still be enough cicadas left to keep the populations going, to keep the future generations. And if you look at this graph in the upper right-hand corner, it kind of shows that phenomena. So if you look at the dotted line, if cicadas were emerging over time like this, and time is on the bottom axis, the cicadas that emerge early here, what do you think is going to happen to those? Well, like I said, everybody likes to eat cicadas, all kinds of animals. There are so few here that the predators can eat them up, and they will eat them before they even have time to reproduce. So they can't keep that generation going. And the same for the other side at the end. The guys that are kind of later, emerging later, the numbers are low, the predators eat them all up. But when you have a lot of cicadas emerging at the same time, the predators could eat as much as they want, and you still have enough to keep the population going. And what this does is it puts selection pressure on both ends of that curve to have more synchronous emergence, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So predator satiation is one of the coolest aspects of periodical cicadas, I think, and it works for them. And it's evolved over years to be very effective. Then they also have these long life cycles, 13 or 17 years. And one of the things we realize is that cicadas, with their sucking straw-like mouthparts, they feed on sap of plants, and the immatures are called nymphs. They live in the ground and they feed on the sap of roots. Okay? In particular, they feed on xylem sap. And xylem is a very nutrient-poor food source. So a lot of insects that feed on nutrient-poor food sources may take longer to develop because they need to get all the nutrients, and it takes time to do that. Also, size matters. A lot of times, the longer your growth period is, the larger your size. The larger your size often turns out to help insects make more eggs, and have their progeny to overwhelm the predators. So more progeny, more babies, the better. Also, we think these long life cycles may have evolved in response to cold conditions. So if you think of kind of ice age phenomena and origins over time, when it was very cold, it's possible that some of these cicadas just stayed in the ground instead of emerging, and they adapted to have these longer life cycles. And then the other thing is to outlive your predators, and we'll talk about that one in just a minute. I'll give you an example of that. Then the last thing is the prime numbers. Why 13 or 17-year life cycles? And this one's pretty complicated, so I'm going to give you a relatively simple answer, or try to anyways. If you think about it, 13 and 17 years, if you have broods that emerge at 13 and 17 years, they will never overlap. The different broods, the 15 broods, only overlap every 221 years. So 13 times 17 is 221. I think the last one occurred in 1998. So the next one is going to occur in 2221. None of us will be around to see that emergence of the two broods together. But think about what would happen if a 13-year and a 17-year brood emerged together. They would end up creating, and they made it, and they would create what we call hybrids. And those hybrids would vary in their lifetime. So some might be 13 years, some might be 14, some might be 15, 16, or 17. But what happens is it dilutes the populations of the original parent brood. And if you dilute the population and reduce the numbers, you're flattening this curve again, and then you're going to end up being consumed by predators, and you could potentially go extinct. So that's one of the theories on why they have these 13 and 17-year life cycles. Then I also said the long life cycle is to help them outlive their predators. And if you go back to your general biology class and you think about predator-prey dynamics, you have something called a numerical response. And this is demonstrated in this graph that we have down the bottom here. So the prey is the solid line, the predators are the dashed line. And if early in the season, and this is time on the bottom axis, early in the season, you have low predator numbers. So your prey, say cicadas, can increase, or just say prey, any type of insect can increase in numbers. And as they increase in numbers, that makes more food for the predators. So the predators eat more and then they do better and start to increase in numbers. But when the prey or the predators, sorry, increase in numbers, what happens to the prey? They start to decrease in numbers. When the prey decrease in numbers, then the predator decrease in numbers. So you have this cycling. Okay, so there's numerical responses to the population densities of the other insect or the other organism. Okay. Well, with cicadas, cicadas live 17 years or 13 years. And think about their predators. Do any of their predators live that long to mount this kind of numerical response? Most birds don't. There might be some that do, but most birds don't. Raccoons, they don't live that long. Fox, squirrels. So what happens is that the cicadas live so long that their predators can't keep up with them. They can't track them. There's no tracking of them. So that allows them to kind of escape some of their predators. And an example of the opposite of that is with cicada killer wasps. Some of you guys are probably familiar with these guys. They will attack the annual cicadas. So they come out mid to late summer when the annual cicadas are there. And what did I say about annual cicadas? How frequently do they emerge out of the ground? Some of them emerge every year. So every year you have a food source for these cicada killer wasps, and the cicada killer wasps emerge every year. So the wasps actually have a predictable prey. Okay. So, and this is just a video of a cicada killer wasp. They burrow holes in the soil. And here she's digging her hole and she's pushing the dirt out a gallery. She will go out, catch a cicada, sting it, paralyze it, fly back to her hole, and carry the cicada down into her hole. If she wants a male wasp larvae or to develop, she puts one egg on it. If she wants a female, she puts 2 cicadas down there and puts 1 egg on them. So they have different amount of food. Females get more foods than males. So she can regulate how she can regulate what gender her immatures, her babies are going to be. But again, predictable prey. It's there every year, so the cicada killer wasp can track that prey. But we don't get that with the periodical cicada. Okay. So another question we frequently get is, how do cicadas know when it's time to emerge? So how do they know when 13 years have gone by or 17 years have gone by? And it's a really good question. And there are a couple of ideas on why this might be. One is that they actually can keep track of environmental cues, so keep track of time, of passing of a year. And remember I said the nymphs are down in the soil feeding on tree roots. They suck the sap from the tree roots, the xylem. Well, trees have seasonal cycles, right? So you have these yearly seasonal cycles of trees. They leaf out in the spring. They start to bring water up from the roots. So you've got more liquids moving through the xylem and the phloem. The concentrations and the hormone or chemicals in that fluid will change over the season. So you've got these seasonal cycles of food, which may allow the cicadas to track every time a year goes by. So a seasonal cycle, year 1, year 2, year 3, okay, until they get up to 13 or 17 years. And then it's like, oh, time to come out, party time, let's get out of the ground. Okay, so that's one possible reason or way that they can know when it's time to emerge. The other idea is that they might have a molecular clock. So basically a biological clock that keeps track of the passage of time. So it knows when 13 years or 17 years are up and it triggers the emergence. So how many of you guys wake up at the same time every morning without setting your alarm clock? I know I do. I wake up about 6 o'clock every morning, regardless. That's because we have what we call our biological clock. Cicadas may have something like that, but instead of every 24 hours getting up, they come out every 13 or 17 years. So they feed for 17 and then they come out. So those are 2 possible ways that cicadas know when it's time to emerge. Now I want to talk a little bit about the periodical cicada life cycle because it's got one of the most interesting life cycles of all insects. And right now, what are we seeing now? Any of you guys who have been working in your yards and your gardens, you've probably seen holes in your soil. So holes about the size of a dime in the soil surface, like you see here. You can see some holes here. And I'll start this video. And this is the leaf litters being moved, and you'll see some holes under there. And sometimes those holes are covered by a mound of mud called a mud turret. And you can see the broken turret here in the upper right, and the turrets here with the holes where the cicadas are down in those holes. So right now, they're down in the holes. Well, first they're deep in the soil feeding. Then this spring, as the weather's getting a little bit warmer and it's getting closer to their time to emerge, they've started to move up in the soil there, and they build these galleries, these tunnels. They get up to the top of the soil and they kind of peek out, look around, and then they go back down in the soil and they hang out there until it's time to emerge. And they know it's time to emerge when the soil temperatures hit 64 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the cue. Soil temperatures 64, they all start emerging. So we're still waiting for that to happen here in this area. The other thing in this lower right-hand corner, this is where a flagstone was lifted off of somebody's yard. And you can see these galleries. And here's actually a cicada nymph right here. What happens is the cicadas are trying to come up to the soil surface and they hit the flagstone or the hardscape, and then they start to burrow horizontally, trying to find their way out to get to the soil surface. So a lot of times if you're lifting stones or logs in your yard, you'll see these kind of sideway galleries, and you might even see the cicadas in there. So one of the things that we're doing now is we can actually dig cicadas. We can go down because they're only about 8 inches or so down in the soil at this time. You've got the holes. If you see holes, you can dig down, lift it up, and you'll see actually the cicada nymphs, the immatures in the soil. If you do that though, put them back and gently put the soil back on top of it. Okay, we don't want to kill any cicadas. So they emerge, massive synchronous emergence at soil temperature 64 degrees. They usually start to emerge at dusk. Okay. And then once they emerge, they make a mad dash for any vertical object. They're hoping it's going to be a tree, but it could be anything. It could be a house, herbaceous plants, could be you if you're standing still. So they just come out of the ground and then they go as fast as they can to a vertical object, because what they want to do is get on a vertical object, hunker down, and then molt into an adult cicada. So here you can see in the video, this is what's called the 5th instar nymph, or immature stages. There are 5 immature stages that go through their cycles in the ground, feeding on the roots. This is the last immature stage, getting ready, wanting to become an adult, molt into an adult. Just going to fast forward this a little bit. So when they emerge, you'll see cicadas crawling everywhere. You can see their front legs are wider, kind of flat and widened compared to the others. Remember, they're digging. They're like little shovels for them. And here you can see the straw-like sucking mouth part that they have. So these guys have made it to the tree. And you can see they're all heading up into the tree. And the higher they can get, the more protected they'll be from predators. But a lot of times they don't all make it up high. A lot of them just have to molt where they are. And you'll be able to do this. You'll get hundreds and hundreds of cicadas emerging on a given night, and you can just pick them up by the handfuls if you want. They're very pretty in the way they look. They've got those red eyes and the nice shiny brown skin, and you can see the little wing buds here because they're starting to form their wings underneath their exoskeleton. Now what's going to happen, once they're up on the tree or a vertical surface, right here there's a seam on the exoskeleton, the skin of this nymph. It's going to split open and the adult cicada is going to emerge out. And I have a video of that you guys can watch. Oops, hold on one second. There we go. This is in fast motion. So the exoskeleton splitting open at the top. There's the adult cicada emerging out. You can see the red eyes and those black spots. the little wings. And now what it's doing is it's pumping air and blood into the wings and into its body. It's trying to get as big as it can. It's trying to expand its wings. And you can see it's white. This is similar. The exoskeleton of insects is made up of chitin, is one of the major products in there. And if you think about other crustaceans, they also have chitin. So this right now, the stage you're seeing is analogous to a soft-shelled crab. We refer to these as soft-shelled cicadas. Okay. And it's also called the teneral period. And they'll be like this for a few hours, this light color, and then they'll start to darken and harden off. Okay, so they sclerotize. And within a few hours, they become darker in color, but it actually takes 4 to 6 days for them to become totally hardened off so that they can mate and the males can start to sing. So after the adults emerge, it's probably about 6 days or so before we start to hear the singing up in the trees by the male cicadas. The other thing about this, this teneral stage, this light-colored, soft-shelled stage, it's very susceptible to predators. And I remember in 2004 being in a park where there were lots of trees and all these cicadas were emerging, and you had a lot of these newly emerged adults, and there were birds there, and the birds were just going after the cicadas, but they were picking off these light-colored ones before they would pick off any of the dark-colored ones. So I think they were just easier to eat overall. Once they become adults, they live for about 2 to 4 weeks, and then they die. Okay, but they do a lot of things before they die. I'll talk about that in a second. They do feed. A lot of people ask, do adult cicadas feed? They do feed. They have that sucking mouth part, and they also feed on xylem sap from the xylem tissue in leaves and on the twigs of trees. Okay, so again, it's the nutrient poor resource, but it is the resource that they feed on. Once they're out and they've hardened off, the males are the only other gender that sings and makes the song. Okay, so only the males make the song, and it's to attract females. And what they do is the song, as I said, is very distinct for each species of cicada. Remember, we have 3 cicadas emerging now at the same time. They're very unique to the species. Then the males, they fly up to the tops of the trees as high as they can get, and they start singing. And the idea is when the males start singing, they attract other males to the trees. So it's even louder, and you have this chorus happening, this really, really loud chorus. Any of you who have experienced cicadas before probably remember what I'm talking about. And their chorus, their singing can be up to, usually it ranges anywhere from 80 to 110 decibels, which is about the sound level of a lawnmower or a jet going overhead. So they can be quite loud. The more males there, the louder the chorus, the more females will be attracted to that tree. Once the females are attracted to the tree, then they get closer to a male that they like. And if they like the male, then the female will flick her wings in response to the male, basically letting that male know that he's the one she wants to be the mother of her babies. Okay. And right now I want to just go back to the singing or the sound that the males make. The males have a structure called a timbal. You can see it right here. It's kind of underneath the wings. Here we've lifted up the wing and you can see the timbal. The timbal is like a membrane, and it has muscles attached to it, and the muscles contract, okay, moving the membrane, and there is it resonates in the abdomen of the cicada. So there's a hollow space in the abdomen. The muscles move the timbal, and that makes a sound, and it resonates and amplifies in that drum-like abdomen of the male cicada. Okay. Females don't make the sound, but they do have something called a tympana to hear the sound. So they do. Males and females have tympanas to hear, but only males can make the sound. I'm going to start the video and watch the timbal. You can see it actually moving with the sound. First, let me turn the sound up. See it moving? He's probably saying, let me go, let me go. Okay. So the adults, the males, have this calling, right? This sound that they make. And there actually have been 5 different songs, male songs identified. Okay. One is the alarm call. So when it's feeling threatened by a predator or you pick it up to hold it, which you can do, this is the sound that it will make. The song to attract other males and females to the big chorus in the trees. And then there's what they call a courtship song. And this is when the female and the male are approaching each other. He has a special song for that. And then, like I said, if she likes him, she will flick her wings, letting him know that she will mate with him. This video is the call, of male call, but it's of a dog day cicada, an annual cicada, but it's still the male calling.
Paula, we're having a little trouble hearing.
Okay, sorry.
It's barely making any sound.
Okay, let me see if I can do that again. I turned up my volume. Let me see if that helps. Any better?
I still did not really hear anything.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I got my volume up. I'm not sure what that's about.
There's some suggestion that you need to share your audio in Zoom, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that. And I'm afraid if I do that, I might lose my audio. So I'm going to go with this, okay? Okay, as I said, the females have something called a tympana. It's a membrane that they have to help them hear the males calling. The females hear the call, the chorus, they go up to the tree, they like the male, they do the wing flick. And it's a special flick kind of pattern that she does that lets the male of her species know that she wants to mate with him. And you can tell male and female cicadas apart. This is, if you look at the tip of their abdomen from the underside of their bodies, the male tends to have a more rounded tip to it, and the females tend to have a pointier tip. And if you look, there's a structure here called an ovipositor, which is an elongate, pointy-like thing that she uses to stick into the twigs of trees and insert her eggs. So once the mating happens, then the females need to lay their eggs. They want to oviposit, and they will oviposit in the twigs of trees. So they find trees that tend to be relatively open in habitat and have long, thin branches going out. So very dense, tight trees, they don't attack as much, but trees that have very long, kind of thin branches going out, that's what they'll go after. They lay their eggs in branches about the size of a pencil, so 3 to 11 millimeters. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner, these little slits that you see are called egg nests. So the female, and look down the bottom, you can see her ovipositor right here is inserted into the wood. She sticks it in there, it makes this slit, and she injects her eggs in there, or inserts her eggs, and she puts about 20 to 30 eggs in each one of these little slits, so each egg nest. And then within a single female's life cycle or lifetime, she can lay 400 to 600 eggs. So if you think about that, that's part of why we have so many cicadas out there, because a single female can lay quite a few eggs. Once the eggs are in those twigs, they will take about 6 to 10 weeks before they mature. Once they mature, they will hatch, and you have these young nymphs about the size of a grain of rice. They will drop down to the ground. So it could be 5 feet or 10 feet from the branch, but some of these trees that get cicada eggs laid in them are quite high, so it could be 50 feet. They drop down to the ground. They have their little wider front legs for digging. They burrow down. Usually they start to feed on the roots of grasses, and then as they get bigger, as they develop into their different immature stages, they move on to the roots of trees. And these are just pictures of the little first instar nymphs right after they hatch. So you can see his front legs are for digging, the wider front legs, just down there in the soil trying to get down and find some food. We also, so that's kind of the life cycle of the cicada, okay? And once the females lay all of her eggs, she dies. So after 2 to 4 weeks of life, the males and females start to die. Okay, so we kind of have the cycle of the cicada. We get a question, when are they going to emerge? This is some data that Mike Rout from my department collected from the stragglers that emerged in 2020. And the very first one came out on April 19th, which is interesting because on April 19th of this year, we had somebody in Towson send us a picture, and it was the first cicada emerging for 2021. So it's the first of its class. It was just one cicada. It was up on the tree and it was emerging as an adult from that nymphal case. Then if you look where you start getting, as it warms up, May 2nd, a little bit after, you'll start seeing more, but you don't get large numbers. And then it was around May 22nd, you really started to get that huge synchronous emergence. And by June 14th, there was no more cicada nymphs coming out of the ground. This is a table that I pulled off of a website called Cicada Mania, which is a really great website for cicada information. So all things cicada, you can probably find out on this website or get a link to it. And it talks about the different stages of the life. So right now, I talked about the holes in the chimneys with the mud chimneys that we've been seeing. I forgot to mention that animals are digging for them. How many of you guys have gone out to your yard and you see the lawn or just the garden area dug up? That's animals digging for the cicadas down in the surface of the soil or down in the soil layer. So foxes, raccoons, skunks, they're all digging up soil. Dogs have been digging them up. We've been getting reports of that. So these things are happening until about early May. Then mid-May or so, we start to get the nymphs emerging and molting to adults. Then it's the singing. Then it's the chorusing and the mating, egg laying. We have predators eating them for a long period of time. Then once, I forgot to mention, when those females oviposit on the branches, it damages the twig, and everything from where the egg nests are out to the tip of the branch dies back, and it's called flagging. So you'll look at a tree and you'll see all the tips, about the last 8 to 10 inches of the branch is brown and flagging because of that oviposition damage. Okay, so that's the general life cycle and timing of it. Let's talk about defense. I've talked about the predator satiation a little bit. Back in time, they used to think that cicadas were defenseless. So this comes from back in 1839, reports of it being poor defenseless species, or in 1851, never seen animals more entirely stupid than the 17-year locust. They make no effort to escape, but allow themselves to be captured with perfect passiveness. So, you know, I'm sure they were just watching them being eaten by all kinds of animals and not really being able to escape. But remember, we talked about periodical cicadas having that predator satiation, the ability to do that. So non-periodical cicadas, the annual cicadas, tend to be cryptic, and they actually can fly and evade predators. And there was a study that measured the airspeed of one of the annual cicadas was 8.4 meters per second. The periodical cicadas, 2.3. So they are a lot slower. But again, they've got that predator satiation, that synchronous massive emergence that helps them to survive and continue to keep the populations going. What eats a cicada? Like I said, almost everything. Raccoons, birds, squirrels, turtles, fish, dogs, cats, people. Everybody everything likes to eat cicadas. Well, not everything, but many, many things. So this is just an example. I can't see you guys, but I'm wondering if any of you have eaten cicadas. And if not, you'll have to try them this year. At the end of the talk, I'm going to put up a website. It's called Cicada Crew UMD. If you Google it, you can come to it. It's the website that we've made with our students at my university. We call ourselves the Cicada Crew. On that site is a cookbook called Cicadalicious. One of the grad students back in 2004 made it, and we've uploaded it to the site. And it's got recipes for all kinds of ways to cook cicadas, main dishes, appetizers, desserts, some really interesting ways to eat cicadas. In addition to the predators I just said, I wanted to show you this video. This is, you can see the cicada on the ground and watch the bird. So as soon as a cicada landed on the ground, the birds were right there to take it off. Down here we have ants. When we have cicadas that aren't doing good, ants and other insects will eat them. And then here in the upper right-hand corner is a fungus that attacks the cicadas. It's called Massospora secundina. Okay, it's a pathogen. It attacks cicadas. The spores rest in the soil. When the cicadas come out of the ground, they pick up the spores and it starts to infect the bodies of the cicadas. And you can see on this cicada, all of this white that you're seeing are the fungal spores. And these spores will go on to other cicadas and infect them. And what happens is when the males try to mate with the females, they pass on the spores. So we call this a sexually transmitted disease. It's an STD. But the other really wacky thing that this Massospora does is it creates what we call sometimes zombie cicadas, because the males, it makes the males act like females. So it kind of feminizes the males. It takes over and changes their behavior. And the males will start doing the wing flex like the females do to attract males to it. So then the male tries to mate with it, and then it gets infected by the spores. So basically an infected cicada is trying to get up close to as many other cicadas as it can to spread the spores. So it's pretty cool that the fungus actually can change the behavior of the cicada. This cicada here in the video doesn't have an abdomen anymore. It had the spores and it basically blew out the whole abdomen. But a lot of times later in the season, if you look at your cicada adults, you'll see that they either have all the fungal spores or they don't have an abdomen anymore. Then finally, what do the cicadas do at the end, or what do they do that's good for the environment? Well, they provide the food for lots of different animals, but they also, when they die, they add a lot of organic matter and nutrients back to the ground, right? So they die underneath the trees, and from which they were feeding on for 17 years, and their shed skins and or their dead bodies will break down and decompose and go back into the soil. The other thing is the holes that we're seeing now, these emergence holes, you have millions of them under your trees. They're good for the soil because they aerate the soil and they help with water infiltration, which also will help the trees to do better. So in one way, they're feeding on the roots of the trees, but in other ways, they give back to the trees. I often get a question, will they hurt my plants? And I already mentioned how they can hurt trees by the egg laying of the females. Well, when the cicadas come out, you'll see lots of them on herbaceous plants like this. So perennials, flowering plants, they're not really going to hurt them. They're just using them as a structure to molt on. They don't really damage your flowering plants. I haven't seen any damage like that. They do, as I said, damage the trees. So here's the oviposition, the egg laying scars from the female. And if you look, the tips of all these branches on this big tree are dark. They've been flagged. You can see it here on this younger tree too. So this tree had so many cicadas laying eggs on it, almost every branch has died back on it. Okay. These are the most vulnerable trees to cicada oviposition damage, but they will attack up to 200 different species. Here we see a relatively large tree. It's an established tree with the flagging from the cicadas. A tree like this can take this damage. Don't worry about it. If you have older, mature trees, they can take the damage, they'll recover from it. It doesn't really hurt the health or the growth of the tree. It's when you have trees like this that you have to worry about. So any newly planted young, small trees can be killed by cicadas. Okay, and these are the ones that you have to protect. And you can see here, this is a young tree that was in a nursery. The cicadas lay eggs and the wind blew and then the branch snapped right there. And this branch is going to die from that point on. So there's lots of talk about what you can do to protect your trees from cicadas. Some people say, can I wrap my tree with cheesecloth or mosquito or cicada netting? Yes, that's a really good thing to do. Others people say, well, why can't I wrap sticky bands around the trunks of my trees to stop them from crawling up? Well, you can do that, but cicadas fly. Once they're adults, they fly, and they will easily fly up over that sticky band. So sticky bands are not a good idea. And then some people want to spray pesticides, and pesticides are not a good idea either, even though you can find them with cicadas on the label. Okay. There's been a couple of studies that have been done that have compared using netting over your trees to exclude the cicadas to various chemicals. Okay. And they found that netting worked the best, but the size of the netting made a difference. It has to be, the openings have to be 1 centimeter square or smaller. So that's 3/8 of an inch or smaller to actually exclude the cicadas. Down here, another study, they used netting versus a systemic insecticide and nothing. And you can see the netting worked much better than any pesticide could work. In addition, when you use pesticides, you've got to worry about non-target effects. You've got to worry about your pollinators and your natural enemies and other animals that may be eating the cicadas. So netting is most effective and it's cost comparable to using a pesticide. And these are just pictures of netted trees. This is, netting, this netting we used was 1/4 inch in size. And you should have your trees covered by mid-May when the cicadas start emerging out of the ground. And when you net, make sure you tie the base around the trunk so the cicadas can't crawl up in there. Okay. Other things you can do, don't let your pets eat too many. Dogs like to eat them, cats like to eat them. They can eat a few, it's not going to hurt them, but if they eat too many, they tend to get a little jammed up and have digestive issues. Make sure you check your swimming pool's filters frequently because they can collect there. Cover your ponds with netting. Eat some, they're yummy and very nutritious, and enjoy the show. The cicadas are out there. They're a great opportunity to learn from them and just enjoy it. Now, I know I love cicadas and I'm very passionate about them and I get excited about them, but I know not everybody feels that way. And some people actually fear cicadas because they are large insects and there are lots of them. So what can you do about that? I think it's important to learn a lot about them. Remember, they can't bite, they can't sting, they can't hurt you at all. They're not going to do anything to hurt you. But I know that doesn't reassure everybody. Seek counseling if it's really bothering you. I have a friend who's a psychiatrist and she's had a lot of patients who's have been very anxious about the cicadas and she's been working through this with them. And you can plan a trip away from the area. If you had cicadas in 2004, you probably will have cicadas this year. If you didn't have cicadas in your area in 2004, you probably won't have them. So even though cicadas occur in much of Maryland, they're still patchy where they occur. So for example, they're not going to occur on the Eastern Shore. And there are some other areas where they weren't so abundant. I remember in 2004, people in Frederick were calling and emailing and saying, where are the cicadas? We don't have any cicadas. We want cicadas. So there were areas of Frederick that didn't have a lot of cicadas. So find out what happened in 2004 to know if you really have something to worry about in your area. But if not, plan a trip. They don't occur on the East Coast, east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi. They don't occur. They don't occur in Florida. They don't occur in the Eastern Shore. So plan a trip for a couple of weeks. If you want to help with cicada research, there's this really great citizen science project going on called Cicada Safari. And you can download the Cicada Safari app. Okay. And here's the website, or you just Google Cicada Safari and you'll find the app on this website. You download it and what you do is when you see a cicada, you take a picture of it, you upload the picture, and it provides data on where it was and the time that you saw the cicada. And it will help us in mapping the distributions of cicadas, give us better information on timing and activity and changes over time. So we're really concerned about how climate change is affecting cicadas, how urbanization and habitat land use patterns have changed and how that's affecting cicada populations. So we want to keep an eye on all the broods and watch what's happening with them. So Cicada Safari, it's fun. It gets you out there outside. You're looking at cicadas and taking pictures. Sounds like a good day to me. And then the last slide, these are some good websites to go to find more information about cicadas. This is the one that the Cicada Crew at the University of Maryland did. It was, there's 8 grad students that Mike Raup and I are teaching in a class. And they put together a lot of different resources for cicada information, including this website where there's lots of cicada information, but they also sell cicada merch. So you can get t-shirts and other things with the Brood 10. I have one on now. I don't know if you guys can see it. So this is one of the cicada t-shirts they sell. Cicada Mania is a great site for lots of cicada information. If you want maps of where cicadas are occurring and where Brood 10 is occurring, this Connecticut site is great. If you're a teacher and you're interested, the Friend to Cicada website has resources on there for teachers. And then Bug of the Week is done by Mike Raup in my department, and he's been blogging about cicadas for the last 3 or 4 weeks, so you can find good stories there. So with that, talked a long time. If you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And thank you very much for your patience in listening.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Shrewsbury. That was really, really interesting. I definitely learned a lot. I hope many of you did as well. We do have a few questions that weren't quite answered throughout your presentation.
Okay.
So I'll just go down the list. There's just a couple. How did some broods go extinct?
Good question. How do some broods go extinct? I don't think they really know for sure, but it may have to do with habitat destruction. So if you think about how much urbanization is happening and how much land is being, forests are being cut down to create farms, to create urban areas. So I think that's part of it. Climate change may be part of it. Things that are going to alter the populations and the densities of them. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. And does the volume of their sound correlate with the heat of the day?
Ooh, good question. Yes, it seems like the warmer it is, the louder they get. Okay. So when the cicadas are active, they start singing about 10 or so in the morning and they sing until about dusk, right? So it's the hottest part of the day when the cicadas are singing, and they sing loud. And the other thing I've noticed is if there's an airplane flying overhead, they will get louder, like they're competing with the airplane. Listen, you guys probably have noticed it too, some of you, but I live not too far. Well, BWI flies over a flight path over my house, so I hear it a lot. The cicadas competing with them.
That's very cool. Okay. And do they serve a purpose in nature other than being food for prey?
Well, I think the food for prey and then the aerating of the soil, adding the nutrients back into the soil, those are the main kind of nature things, but very important. They're important in the food web, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole food web dynamics.
Okay. I think so how long does it take the female to lay all of her eggs?
Good question. I think she lays them probably over a 2 to 3 week period.
Okay.
I'm not positive on that, but I'm guessing because they live 2 to 4 weeks, she's probably laying eggs that most of that time. So she's got to find her mate, but then she just lays her eggs. The other thing that I didn't mention is the females only mate once. So a male will find a female and mate with her, and that's it for her. Then she gets busy laying her eggs. Whereas then the male can go off and mate with other females. There's just something not quite right with that system.
And how deep in the ground are they going? But how deep beneath the surface do they dig?
When they're developing over those 17 years, they're down about 18 inches to 2 feet. And
Okay.
if you think about trees, if you know anything about trees and their root zone, that's about where the root zone is of many trees.
Okay.
Right now, they're up to about 6 or 8 inches in the ground.
All right. And are there any non-native cicadas in America or in Maryland in our area?
No, as far as I know, all the cicadas we have are native cicadas.
Okay. And when you say eat one, do you mean to just pick it up and eat it alive? Or are there any concerns for humans eating cicadas that have fungus spores?
Oh, I have not heard of any concerns of that. I'm guessing that fungus is pretty specific for cicadas. Check before you eat them. But I would, if I'm going to eat a cicada, I would eat one of the nymphs. Or actually the newly emerging adults. So those soft-shelled cicadas, that's the stage to eat. And if you're going to eat it fresh right off of the tree, try to find one that maybe isn't, the wings haven't developed all the way, or that's fallen to the ground. That's probably going to die anyways, because we don't want to, keep working on that population. So do that. Otherwise, I think eating the soft shells and or the nymphs are the best stage. If you're going to eat the later, at once they harden off, pull the wings and the legs off so you can get rid of that crunchy part.
Okay.
Then do it that way.
And you touched on this a little bit, but about how climate change is affecting the emergence of periodical cicadas, and entomologists are currently studying this, you said, with the citizen science. Is this an ongoing thing?
Yes.
Okay.
There's various data on the occurrence of cicadas, their range and where they are in the different broods and everything. But now with citizen science and all the technology we have, we can get much more data and get a better feel for what's going on. There's a guy named Gene Kritsky. He's a scientist. He's out in Indianapolis. And he has been studying cicadas a long time. And he has some data that shows that there's a location in Ohio that now emerges 2 weeks earlier than it did before 1950. So probably climate change affecting the emergence time, making it emerge earlier. So we need to, that's one way that climate change can do it. The other way they think that climate change may disrupt the cicadas is, remember I said they may know when 13 or 17 years is up by counting the seasonal cycles of the trees, right? So the flow of the sap and nutrients in the trees. Well, if we're not having our normal winters, we may have trees that think they're in winter, and then it gets warm and they think it's spring and they start to move their nutrients again. And then it gets cold and they think it's winter again. So this disruption could actually fool the cicadas. So instead of emerging at 17 years, maybe they're going to emerge at 13 years or 12 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So they don't know this for sure, but that's a possibility that they think may happen. And again, the more that emerge off cycle, that means they're probably going to all get eaten by the predators, and it reduces the actual brood number in the year the brood actually emerges because they emerged early.
So more questions keep coming in. Do you mind a few more?
If
Great.
you guys are good, I'm good.
Why are their eyes red? And is there truly rare blue-eyed cicadas?
Good question. I don't know why their eyes are red. It's just the pigment that they have, and I'm not sure why that is. But there is variation in the color of the eyes. So the majority of them are red, but there are also white-eyed cicadas and blue-eyed cicadas. And there's this kind of urban legend, urban myth going around that if you find a blue-eyed cicada, that you can actually get money for it, like a prize. The only prize you actually get is the excitement of finding a blue-eyed cicada, because they are pretty uncommon. I've seen them a couple of times, but it's not rare, but it's not common at all. So
yeah, I do remember neighbors bragging about finding a blue-eyed cicada when I was a kid, the last time they were here.
Yeah.
And what do they taste like?
If you eat them just fresh, like off the tree, they kind of have a nutty, buttery texture to them, flavor to them.
Okay. Interesting.
And then if you cook them with something like a little garlic and butter and put a little scampi on there and stuff, they taste like whatever you're spicing them up with.
Okay. And how did you get into cicadas and this field of study, entomology?
I started learning about plants. Well, back in college when I was going to undergrad, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life and major in. And I thought, well, I want to do something to help solve the world problems. So I started taking plant classes, and then I majored in plant science. But you learn about insects and diseases of plants at that point. And when I started learning about pest management and insects, I just really got excited about it and passionate about it. And here I am.
All right.
But I study a lot of different insects, and I mainly study insects that are pests of ornamental plants, so landscapes, nurseries, golf courses, and I look at kind of the ecologically based pest management. So how can we manage habitats or landscapes to make them more favorable for natural enemies and prevent pests from outbreaking? So that's kind of what I do, a lot of conservation, biocontrol, restoration, those types of things.
Great.
But cicadas are just such a really cool, exciting insect, and different than most insects. I can't help but be passionate about them and just want to learn about them and share their passion, their excitement with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been quite a few questions that are sort of plant specific,
Sure.
asking about a tree or a shrub. Do you have a recommended resource or place or website where people can specifically, maybe Master Gardener Network or somewhere where people can ask these really plant specific questions?
The University of Maryland has a home and garden information center, and you can send in, if you Google the site, you can send in questions to them and they'll answer your questions. They may even have some phone hours too. I'm not sure about that anymore, but
Okay.
that's that. But again, your annuals, perennials, herbaceous plants are not going to be damaged by the cicadas. Your large trees, you don't have to worry about. Okay, they are going to recuperate it from any damage. It's your smaller, young, not established trees yet that you have to worry about, and they're really the only plants that you have to worry about. And
So
trying to net them to exclude the cicadas is the best way.
Okay, and what about vegetable gardens and things like that?
No worries.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Sorry, Gina. They might be on the plants, but like I said, they've crawled out of the ground and they're trying to find a tree, but they found a tomato that was there and they just climbed off it. Okay. But they're not going to be feeding on it or damaging it.
Good to know. And then let's see, we're almost through all of them. Can we take the temperature of the soil with a meat thermometer to know when they might emerge in the area?
Good question. You can take the temperature with a thermometer. Whether a meat thermometer or not would work, I don't know.
Okay.
So one of my colleagues, Dan Gruner, has a class that he's teaching, and he's got about 20 students. It's an ecology class, and they've all got these long kind of soil thermometers that they can put into the ground, and they're measuring the temperature, and you measure the temperature 8 inches down. And when the temperature hits 64, that's when the cicada should start emerging. But of course, there's day-to-day variation on that. And then you can go from there. There's also a way, if you go to the Cicada Safari website, and he talks about a way to measure the soil temperature based on air temperature. So you get, like, for 3 days in a row, you get the high and the low, and you get the average, and you subtract something. But he explains this on the website, so you could actually do it that way too.
Very cool. Okay. And then last question is, where did you get your awesome earrings?
Nice, huh? Cicada earrings. My grad student had them. Her mother bought some for her, and I'm like, where did you get them? From Etsy, the Etsy site. Yeah,
of course.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
And I was in the post office today, and somebody saw them, and she's like, "Are those cicadas? I hate those things." And I'm like, "No, we love those things."
They are very cool.
Thank you.
I know a local artist in Baltimore who's been working on cicada art. She's been making pins and magnets. I already bought some myself. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You might have to send me her information.
Yeah, I will. So then the one last thing is there was a suggestion with how to share the audio.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that, guys.
No, that's okay. Would you be able to maybe revisit that one slide? Is that possible to see?
Sure.
Okay.
So tell me again. I go into the audio.
I tried to do it from my end, but I don't think I could.
And what was the suggestion to?
Where you have your share screen, there's a little up caret, and it.
Oh, okay. So let me share screen again. Okay.
And then there should be like a little upward arrow. Trying to. See.
I see the mute.
I think when you go to share your screen and you're choosing which screen to share at the bottom, it says share computer audio or something to that effect.
Oh yeah.
Share.
If not, do you have is the
Yeah.
sound on the website from?
Oh, wait, share sound,
Yep.
that one? Let's try it. Let me go back to that slide. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. And like Rachel was saying, if it's not, if we can't get it to work here, then are some of these videos things that we could find, that we could watch for on the website or find on YouTube?
Yeah, if you let's try that. Oops. Let's try this one. If you go to the Cicada Crew, just Google Cicada Crew UMD and you'll get to our website. There's a resources tab, and under there are all kinds of resources, but Mike Raup, we've been loading his bug of the weeks on there, and there are videos on there with sound and that type of stuff. Or you can go to Mike's bug of the week, and he's been doing cicadas the last few weeks. So
Okay.
see if this works better. Ah,
Yep.
so this is a male annual cicada calling. And let's do the alarm call. Is it really loud? Oh, because all my volumes are up. So that's the alarm call when the cicada's feeling threatened. He's really threatened now. Remember, it's only, oops, it's only the males. This is the calling song when the male is trying to attract a specific female. And then this is the courtship song. So remember, there are 3 species out there too, and they each have that unique song. So you can tell, and if you Google cicada songs or sound, you will find it. But if you go to the Cicada Mania website, I think they have links to the different sounds on there too.
Wow. That was intense. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, and thanks for whoever came up with that idea. I didn't even realize that was an option.
Yeah, I'm glad we figured that out.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that answers most of our questions.
Great.
And so do any lawn treatment services have anything bad for the emerging cicadas, like the nymphs?
Oh, good question. Good question. I think we don't really know for sure, but we know that a lot of insecticides, if they're using insecticides on the lawn, then that could be potentially harmful to the cicadas. So I would suggest to hold off on any insecticide treatments to your lawn, and maybe even any chemical treatments in general, until the cicadas have emerged up out of the ground and they've all become adults. So that should be by probably the first week in June, the end of the first week in June, they should all be out of the ground.
Okay.
So wait until then.
And then one last question, actually, I missed this one earlier. Given that they are on every continent, why are the 13 and 17-year cicadas only present in the Eastern North America?
Good question. And we don't really know the answer to that.
Okay.
And there's actually 2 other countries that have a periodical cicada, but it's a 4-year and an 8-year cicada. And I forget, they're in Asia. I can't remember which countries they are, but it's just kind of throws you off because it's not a prime number. They're not prime numbers and they're shorter. So it just makes everything more confusing and interesting at the same time. So I'm not sure why It could have to do with glacial patterns over time, right? So any cicadas that were there, if we had glaciers, then they stayed underground longer to because it was too cold to come up. And then once everything warmed up, then it came up. So that could have selected for longer life cycles.
Okay.
That's the main thing, that theory anyways on that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you for answering everyone's questions. For anyone still watching, this presentation has been recorded and it will be posted on the AACPL YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. So if you'd like to come back and revisit some of these slides and see the information again, you can visit us again on YouTube to watch the presentation. And definitely recommend checking out the Cicada Crew website and the Bug a Day. I poked around there. Bug a Week, sorry. I poked around there myself and it is really cool. So I definitely recommend that. And all right.
And I just want to thank everybody too, and thanks for all your nice comments and everything. It's been really nice chatting with you guys, and I really hope you can enjoy the cicadas and just have fun with them.
Definitely. Yep, I'm definitely looking forward to them.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who joined us tonight, and thank you, Dr. Shrewsbury.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Yeah.
Gina. Bye, Rachel.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.